When you hear Slavic mythology, you probably think of monsters from The Witcher, right? Or maybe these ancient epic tales passed down for thousands of years. But what if I told you that the version we all know isn't really the whole story? In fact, it might not be the original story at all. Okay, so let's just rip the Band-Aid off. The biggest, most central mystery of Slavic mythology is this. There are no original myths. I'm serious. There's no grand epic poem, no sacred book, nothing like the Norse Eddas. We have this amazing world full of gods and spirits, but a mythology with no original stories to tell us who they were.
And we're all pretty familiar with the monstrous side of this world, right? Thanks to pop culture, we've got plenty of strigas and leshies to fight in video games. But that's really just scratching the surface. We know the monsters, sure, but what about the actual gods who ruled this cosmos? The ones the monsters were afraid of?
And this is why it's so difficult. As the historian M. Leeser puts it, it's pretty much impossible to fully understand this stuff with the evidence we have left. And that's not because historians aren't trying. It's because of who the ancient Slavs were and what happened to them over the centuries.
So if there are no ancient books to read, how in the world do we know anything at all? Well, we have to become historical detectives. We have to dig through all these layers of evidence, which are often fragmented and super biased, to try and find even a glimpse of the truth.
Think of it like an archaeological dig. At the very top, the newest layer, you have modern inventions, neo-pagan stories, and some outright fakes. Dig a little deeper, you hit the 19th century, with all these folklore collections that are kind of tangled up with nationalism. Deeper still, you get to medieval accounts from outsiders, like Christian monks who were pretty horrified by what they saw. And then, way down at the bedrock, you find the oldest, hardest evidence to work with. A few artifacts and some clues hidden in the languages themselves.
And here's the crucial thing to understand. It's not that the stories never existed. They absolutely did. The early Slavs were a people of the spoken word. In fact, their very name comes from Slovo, the word for word. They told these amazing tales around campfires for centuries, but they just never wrote them down. And by the time they adopted writing, it came along with Christianity, which, wasn't exactly keen on preserving the old pagan ways.
But even with all those challenges, the oldest sources do give us these faint outlines of the most powerful gods. We can't see the whole family portrait, but we can definitely make out the biggest figures standing in the back.
And the biggest figure, without a doubt, is Perun. He shows up pretty much everywhere in the Slavic world. He's the god of thunder and the sky. Think Zeus or Thor. He was the creator of the lightning bolt. The giant oak tree was his, and when you made a really serious oath, you swore it in his name, often with a sacrifice. This was a god you did not mess with. Now this is where things get, well, really interesting and a little messy. Check this out. We have Svarog, who seems to be a god of the forge, like a celestial smith. Then there's Svarojic, whose name literally means son of Svarog, and he's called the god of fire. And then we have Dazbog, the sun god, who is also called the son of Svarog. So what gives? Are we looking at a father and his two sons? Or are these just three different names for one single god of fire in the sun? Honestly, the sources are all over the place, and we just don't know for sure. And that ambiguity, that mystery, is a huge part of what it's like to study Slavic mythology. And this chart really just hammers that point home. Outside of a major player like Perun, who everyone seemed to know, worship was super localized. In the east, you had the great earth goddess Mokosh. Over with the Baltic Slavs, they had a four-headed oracle god named Sventovid. And also in the east, you find Veles, this really complex god of cattle and the underworld. It wasn't one single religion, it was more like a family of related beliefs.
But for the average person living day to day, their faith probably had way less to do with these big, distant gods in the sky, and way more to do with the spirits that lived in every single corner of their world. I mean, for them, the world was literally alive.
Take the Leshy, for example. He was the guardian, the master of the forest. He could be as tall as the trees or as small as a mushroom. He could be a total trickster and lead you to your doom, or if you were respectful, he might actually help you out. The way you could spot him, if he looked human, was by looking for the weird details. His shoes would be on the wrong feet, and his coat would be buttoned the wrong way.
And the Leshy was just the beginning. Every place had its own spirit. In the rivers, you had the Vadanoi, a grumpy old water spirit who would totally drown you if you weren't careful. In your own house, living by the stove, was the domovoi, a little guardian ancestor spirit who protected the family. And in the waterways, you had the rusalka, these beautiful but tragic spirits of drowned women who would lure men to their deaths. This idea of a world just teeming with spirits extends all the way to death itself. And it's right here, in this collision between the old pagan beliefs and the new Christian ones, that we find the origin of the most famous Slavic monster of them all.
You see, for the early pagan Slavs, the only right way to deal with the dead was cremation. A funeral pyre was absolutely essential. This wasn't just about getting rid of a body, it was a sacred ritual. They believed burning the body released the soul, allowing it to go to the afterlife, and, this is the important part, preventing it from coming back to haunt the living.
And they took these rites with deadly seriousness. As this Christian writer noted, completely horrified, it was apparently pretty common for a widow to voluntarily join her husband on the funeral pyre to make sure they could continue their journey together in the next life.
So this timeline basically shows us exactly how the vampire was born. In the pagan era, you cremate the body. The soul is free, the dead stay dead. Simple. But then comes Christianization, which enforces burial in the ground. Now, from the old Slavic point of view, this traps the soul inside the corpse. This creates this deep cultural fear of bodies that aren't properly dealt with, bodies that could physically claw their way out of the grave. And from that fear, the restless dead, the upper, the original vampire, is born.
And let's be clear, these were not charming, brooding aristocrats. This account from a 14th century chronicle describes a walking corpse that rose from its tomb every night to go around slitting people's throats. I mean, look at the details. Rising from the tomb, attacking the living, and being stopped with a stake. It's all right there. The creature even complains about it.
So, if we have no original epics, a pantheon that's in pieces, and folklore that was born out of this huge cultural clash, how did we end up with the big epic stories we sometimes hear today? Well, they were pieced together much, much later from all these whispers from the past.
And this is maybe the biggest takeaway of all. Those sweeping creation myths, the epic battles between gods, they are not translations of ancient Slavic books. They are modern reconstructions. Brilliant work by academics who took all those tiny fragments from folklore and language and put them together into a story that finally makes sense. And this is the kind of world that emerges when you do that. A cosmos structured like a giant world tree. You've got Prav, the heavenly world of the gods up top, Yav, our world here in the middle, and Naf, the underworld of the dead down in the roots. And the engine that drives this whole world is the epic eternal conflict between Perun, the thunder god up in the branches, and Veles, the underworld god down in the roots. Every time you see a thunderstorm, that's just Perun chasing Veles across the sky because Veles stole his divine cattle again. Which brings us to a really fascinating final thought. If the ancient Slavs left behind a mythology, without any myths, who gets to write them now? Is it the scholars, the fantasy novelists, the video game designers, the modern pagans trying to reconnect with their heritage? It just shows that this mythology isn't some dead thing in a history book. It's alive, and it's still being written, even today.